Our sixth lesson in talking about details is called Powerful Details. And one thing that I've noticed as we write our readers' response letters is that we can find details, but we aren't elaborating, and our ideas of details tend to be only quotes. So today's lesson are sentence starters to make sure that we fully explain each of the details that we find in our reading. We don't want general details, we want specific and powerful. Higher level, what are you thinking? What details prove what you're thinking? One way to get ourselves started is by pointing out to the reader what the main idea is of the novel that we're reading. So what do you think it is at this point? What's happening? Once I can point out what I think the theme, otherwise known as main idea, is of the novel, I then am going to give one specific detail from the text to prove it. So this is where I could use a quote, or I could summarize something that has happened, but this sentence starter is very helpful. Rather than moving on to my next detail, look at the phrase that comes next. This specific detail helps the reader to, well, what does it help me to do as a reader? Am I better able to understand a character? Am I better able to follow along in the story? Am I better able to understand a greater meaning? What is the purpose of it? Once I give that first specific detail and explain it, next I again provide another key detail. So if you take a look at this sentence starter, I just changed up the wording and said another key detail is, and now I'm going to point out a second powerful detail from the story that I'm reading. Rather than moving on, I'm going to explain this. And so take a look at how I reworded that sentence. This supports the theme because, and now I'm going to elaborate on how this particular detail really helps me see the story much better, and I'm using it to support the central idea. Before I move on to my last one, I'm going to use these particular sentence starters, and the last way I can do is just giving myself a transition word. Additionally, now I don't need to say this supports or another key detail. Now I can just give my third powerful detail. And so I would explain something that I saw in the reading. And rather than saying this supports because, I use the phrase this helps establish what? Establish means create. So what does this particular last detail help to do for the story? So my point of today's powerful details lesson, when you take a look at it, is not that you can't find powerful details, it's how to make sure I'm elaborating and explaining it. Remember, students who respond and get a 3 are doing just what you see within here in addition to sharing their summary and what they're thinking when they're reading. So just taking these sentence starters alone and filling in the blanks doesn't guarantee that you've met the goal. This is in addition to all that we write. But if I'm looking to get to a 4, the elaboration of each of these lines is going to be essential to really helping the reader see that critical thinking that I'm completing as I read.